Ambassador Che's hands trembled as she stood in the massive council chamber. The room stretched out like a cathedral, with representatives from dozens of alien species seated in towering chairs that made her feel tiny. Her violet skin had turned pale with fear, and sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool air. "Please," she said, her voice echoing in the vast space. "Our star is dying. In just 4 months it will explode and kill everyone on our 3 worlds. We need your help to save 2.3 billion people." The silence that followed felt like a death sentence. Che looked around at the faces staring down at her. Some looked bored, others seemed angry. None showed any hint of sympathy. The Altaran delegate rose from his crystal throne. His blue skin shimmered as he spoke in a cold voice. "The Zephyrians were raiders not so long ago, pirates who attacked our trade ships and showed no mercy to innocent crews." "That was generations ago," Che protested. "Those people are dead. Our children had nothing to do with those crimes, but the damage was already done." The Korthak representative slammed his armored fist on his desk. "My grandfather died in a Zephyrian raid. Why should we save the descendants of murderers?" One by one, the accusations poured out. The Zephyrians had raided the Velkari mining colonies. They had stolen food shipments meant for starving worlds. They had captured slaves and sold them at black markets. Every old wound was torn open again. Che tried to defend her people. "We changed. We joined the galactic community. We've been peaceful for over a century. We've sent aid to disaster zones. We've shared our medical knowledge freely." The council didn't want to hear it. The Mortak delegate stood up, his tentacles writhing with disgust. "Peace born from weakness. Not genuine change. The moment you had strength again, you'd return to your old ways." The voting began immediately. Species after species cast their votes against providing aid. Some didn't even bother to explain their reasoning. They simply said no and sat back down. Others gave long speeches about justice and consequences. The Vaxian representative tried to offer a compromise. "Perhaps we could evacuate a small number. The children, at least." But even that was voted down. The council feared that showing any mercy would encourage other species to return to piracy, knowing they'd be rescued if they faced extinction. As the final votes were counted, Che realized the horrible truth. Not a single species had voted to help. The quarantine order was passed unanimously. No ship would be allowed to enter Zephyrian space. Any vessel that tried would be destroyed by council forces. "This isn't justice," Che whispered, tears running down her cheeks. "This is genocide." The council chairman, a massive creature covered in scales, spoke the final words. "The Zephyrian system is hereby sealed. This session is concluded." Che stood alone in the emptying chamber, knowing she had just witnessed her people's death sentence. Outside the windows, stars twinkled peacefully, unaware that billions of innocent lives had just been condemned to die in the cold vacuum of space. Back on the Zephyrian homeworld, chaos erupted the moment news of the council's decision reached them. Che had transmitted the devastating verdict from her ship, and within hours, every street corner buzzed with panicked voices and desperate plans. The 3 remaining colonies held over 2 billion people, but their ancient transport fleet could barely carry 50 million. The math was simple and terrifying. Less than 1 in 40 would survive. Government officials gathered in emergency sessions, their faces grim as they designed the most horrible lottery system in galactic history. Every family received a number. Every person got a classification. Essential workers, scientists, and young adults received priority ratings. Children under 10 got automatic spots. Everyone else faced the random draw of death. In the capital, city of Vorthak, families huddled around their communication screens as the first lottery results appeared. The Kim family celebrated when their 8-year-old daughter Min was selected, then sobbed when they realized they wouldn't be going with her. Thousands of similar scenes played out across the planet. "I can't leave you, Mama," little Min cried, clinging to her mother's legs. Her mother, Dr. Yun, knelt down and held her daughter tight. "You have to be brave for us. Live a good life and remember our stories." The separation centers became places of pure heartbreak. Parents kissed their children goodbye, not knowing if they'd ever see them again. Elderly grandparents patted their adult children's shoulders and said they'd had good lives already. Young couples drew straws to see who would board the ships. Meanwhile, Che worked frantically from her communication center, sending messages to every species she could contact. She reached out to old friends, distant trading partners, even former enemies. Her voice grew hoarse from recording plea after plea. "This is Ambassador Che of the Zephyrian Republic. Our star will explode in 8 weeks. We need immediate evacuation, assistance. We can pay in rare minerals, technology, anything you want." But the responses were all the same. Council orders forbid any assistance. Cannot risk political complications. Deeply sorry, but unable to help. Some species didn't even bother replying. On the outer colonies, the situation grew desperate as their sun became increasingly unstable. Massive solar flares erupted daily, each one stronger than the last. The farming settlements on Zephyr 2 lost their protective shields when a particularly violent flare overloaded the power grid. Thousands died instantly from radiation poisoning. The remaining colonists watched their sky turn angry red as electromagnetic storms raged overhead. Communication systems failed regularly. Power plants struggled to maintain basic life support. Children couldn't play outside anymore because the radiation levels would kill them in minutes. Transport ships launched every day, packed beyond safe capacity with refugees. Some vessels broke down during the journey, their overloaded engines failing in deep space. Others made it to the nearest safe systems, only to be turned away by border patrols, enforcing the Council's quarantine order. As week 6 approached, the star's behavior became even more erratic. Scientists calculated they had maybe 14 days before the final explosion. The evacuation ships couldn't possibly save even half of those still waiting. Che stared at her latest transmission reports. Silence from every corner of the galaxy. Her people were truly alone, abandoned by a universe that had decided their past crimes made them unworthy of salvation. The alarm systems in the Zephyrian Command Center started blaring at exactly 0347 local time. Night shift operator June nearly spilled his coffee as dozens of red warning lights flashed across his console. His tired eyes widened as he stared at the readings. "Commander Shin, you need to see this immediately," he called out, his voice cracking with excitement and fear. "Commander," Shin rushed over, still putting on his uniform jacket. "What's the situation? More solar flares?" "No, sir. Long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures approaching our system. Multiple ships, bigger than anything we've ever seen." Shin's blood ran cold. Had the Council decided to send warships to make sure no one escaped? "Are they Council vessels?" June shook his head, frantically checking his readings again. "That's the strange part, sir. The energy patterns don't match anything in our database. These aren't Altaran ships or Korthak cruisers. I've never seen signatures like this." Within minutes, the command center filled with technicians and officers. Everyone stared at the massive shapes moving through space toward them. The objects were enormous, some larger than entire Zephyrian cities, but they remained invisible to visual scanners, hidden behind some kind of advanced cloaking technology. Ambassador Che arrived at the command center, still in her sleeping clothes, her violet hair disheveled from being woken up. "Tell me we're not about to be attacked by Council forces." "We don't think so," Shin replied. "These ships aren't from any known galactic species." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. After being abandoned by the entire galaxy, the last thing they needed was unknown aliens showing up during their final evacuation attempts. Were these ships coming to help, to attack, or just to watch them die? Then something incredible happened. The mysterious vessels began dropping their cloaking shields. The first ship appeared like a ghost materializing from the void. It was massive and angular, built for both war and transport. But the design was completely unfamiliar. Instead of the flowing curves of Altaran ships or the spiky armor of Korthak vessels, these ships looked practical and sturdy. More ships appeared. Dozens of them, then hundreds. "By the ancestors," whispered Che, her hand covering her mouth in shock. The ships bore markings that made everyone in the command center gasp. The name Terran Federation was painted in bold letters across the largest vessel's hull. Below it, in smaller text, was the word Earth. "Humans," Shin breathed. "Those are human ships." Everyone knew about humans. but mostly as a cautionary tale. They were the species that had crashed into galactic politics 30 years ago with all the subtlety of a meteor. Their first contact had been a disaster involving misunderstandings, weapons fire, and several diplomatic incidents that had embarrassed everyone involved. The galaxy had quickly labeled them as violent primitives, too aggressive for civilized society, too unpredictable for serious diplomacy. Most species avoided human space entirely, considering them barely advanced barbarians who had gotten lucky with faster-than-light travel. But here they were, with a fleet that dwarfed anything the Galactic Council could field. The lead ship alone was 3 times larger than the biggest Zephyrian vessel. Che stared at the display screen, her mind racing. Why were humans here? How had they even learned about the Zephyrian crisis? The Council had specifically avoided informing primitive species like humans about their decision. More importantly, what did the humans want? Were they here to scavenge the ruins after the star exploded? Did they plan to claim Zephyrian territory? Or was this some kind of elaborate revenge for ancient raids that had targeted human colonies decades ago? The command center fell silent as everyone waited for the humans to make contact. After being abandoned by every civilized species in the galaxy, the Zephyrians were about to discover what the barbarians had planned for them. The communication screen in the Zephyrian command center flickered to life, and suddenly they were looking at a human face. Admiral Jin appeared to be in his 50s, with grey streaks in his dark hair and deep lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent making difficult decisions. He wore a simple blue uniform, without the elaborate decorations that most galactic species favored. "This is Admiral Jin of the Terran Federation Fleet," he said, his voice calm and steady. "We're here to help with your evacuation." The Zephyrian officers stared in stunned silence. Commander Shin was the first to find his voice. "Admiral, this system is under Council quarantine. Any ships that enter risk being destroyed." Jin's expression didn't change. "We're aware of the political situation. We're also aware that you have less than 2 weeks before your star goes supernova." Behind the Admiral, the command bridge of his ship bustled with activity. Che could see human crew members working at their stations, and through the windows, the massive fleet stretched out like a city in space. She counted at least 200 ships of various sizes. "How many vessels do you have?" she asked, barely believing what she was seeing. 437 ships, Jin replied. "We've converted passenger liners, cargo haulers, mining vessels, even some of our colony ships. Every vessel that can carry people safely through hyperspace." The numbers hit Che like a physical blow. The humans had brought more evacuation capacity than she had dared to dream possible. But she had to ask the obvious question. "Why?" Her voice broke slightly. "Why are you here? Your people and mine? We have history, bad history." Jin leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, his stern expression softened slightly. "Yes, there were conflicts between our peoples decades ago. Zephyrian raiders attacked some of our outer colonies. People died on both sides." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But that was a different time. Those raiders are long dead. The people dying now are farmers, teachers, children, shopkeepers. They never hurt anyone." "The Council doesn't see it that way," Shin said bitterly. "The Council has the luxury of holding grudges," Jin replied. "We've been monitoring galactic communications for months. We heard your ambassador's pleas. We watched as every single species turned their backs on 2.3 billion innocent people." One of Jin's officers approached and whispered something in his ear. The Admiral nodded and turned back to the screen. "We're already deploying our evacuation teams. My ship's medical officer, Dr. Hana, is preparing to beam down with emergency supplies. Our engineers are studying your population centers to optimize transport efficiency." Che felt tears running down her cheeks. "I don't understand. The galaxy calls your people violent primitives, barbaric. Why would you risk everything to save people who supposedly aren't worth saving?" Jin's weathered face grew serious. "Maybe that's exactly why we're here. When the civilized galaxy abandons innocent people to die, somebody has to remember what civilization actually means." He stood up from his chair, and Che could see the determination in his eyes. "We've learned from our own mistakes. Earth almost destroyed itself in wars before we reached the stars. We know what it's like to face extinction. No one should die. Alone when help is possible. The Admiral gestured toward the fleet visible through his bridge windows. Every ship out there volunteered for this mission. Our crews knew they might never make it home. They came anyway. Because, Jin continued, we believe that how you treat people when they're helpless says everything about who you really are. Within 6 hours of Admiral Jin's arrival, human transport shuttles were landing in every major Zephyrian city. The speed caught everyone off guard. While the Zephyrians had spent weeks arguing about lottery systems and priority lists, the humans simply started moving people. Captain Hana stepped off the first medical transport in the capital city of Vorthak, her team carrying equipment that looked completely different from standard galactic medical gear. Instead of the delicate, precise instruments most species used, human equipment appeared sturdy and practical. We need to set up triage centers immediately, she told the local medical staff. Who are your most critical patients? Dr. Earn, who had been working without sleep for days, looked skeptical. Our physiology is completely different from yours. Your equipment won't work on us. Hana smiled and opened one of her medical cases. That's why we brought these. Inside were dozens of adaptable scanners, monitors that could adjust their readings for different species, and even surgical tools with interchangeable components. We've been studying galactic medical databases for years, she explained, while her team set up a field hospital in the city square. Just because the Council doesn't share technology with us doesn't mean we can't learn. The human approach to evacuation was unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever seen. Instead of complicated bureaucratic processes, human soldiers simply went door to door, asking families if they were ready to leave. No paperwork, no waiting lists, no arguing about who deserved to be saved. Sergeant Tay, a young human soldier barely out of his 20s, knocked on the door of an elderly Zephyrian couple who had already accepted they would die on their homeworld. The old male Quan had refused to register for the lottery, insisting younger people should get the spaces. Sir, we're here to take you to the transport ships, Tay said politely. There's no point, Quan replied sadly. I'm too old. My joints don't work properly anymore. I'll just slow everyone down. Without hesitation, Tay bent down and carefully lifted the elderly Zephyrian onto his back. That's what we're here for, sir. No one gets left behind. The sight of human soldiers carrying Zephyrian elderly, pushing wheelchairs, and helping families gather their belongings spread across social media within hours. People who had never seen humans before watched in amazement as these supposed barbarians treated their refugees with more compassion than their own galactic neighbors had shown. Captain Sil. Hana worked 18-hour shifts, adapting human medical procedures for Zephyrian patients. When a child arrived with severe radiation poisoning from the solar flares, she spent 6 hours straight, figuring out how to modify their treatment protocols. Why are you doing this? Dr. Yoon asked during a brief break. Every life matters, you keep saying. But why does our lives matter to you? Hana paused from adjusting a scanner calibrated for Zephyrian brain activity. Because that's what civilized people do. They help when help is needed. The most shocking revelation came when Admiral Jin invited Ambassador Che aboard his flagship. He led her through corridors filled with refugee housing units, medical bays designed for multiple species, and supply rooms stocked with food that could nourish dozens of different alien biologies. We built all of this 2 years ago, Jin explained, as they walked past construction crews installing additional sleeping quarters. When we started monitoring galactic politics, we realized the Council would eventually abandon someone. We wanted to be ready. Che stopped walking, stunned. You prepared for this. You built refugee facilities before you even knew who would need them. The galaxy is full of small species, minor worlds, colonies that could face disasters, Jin said. The Council only protects the big players. Someone needed to be ready for everyone else. They reached an observation deck where Che could see the massive operation in action. Human ships moved in perfect coordination, ferrying thousands of Zephyrians to safety every hour. The efficiency was breathtaking. Your people call us barbarians, Jin said quietly. Maybe they're right. Maybe civilized people would have calculated the political costs and stayed home. The evacuation took 11 days. 11 impossible days where humans worked around the clock, moving 2.3 billion Zephyrians to safety. On the final day, as the last transport ship lifted off from the surface of Zephyr Prime, the star began its death throes. Che stood on the bridge of the human dreadnought Harmony, watching her homeworld through the massive viewing screen. The planet looked so peaceful from this distance, its purple oceans and silver continents gleaming in the unstable light of their dying sun. It was hard to believe that in a few hours, none of it would exist anymore. Final transport has cleared the atmosphere, reported Lieutenant Day from his station. All ships are at safe distance. Admiral Jin nodded grimly. Signal the fleet to jump to hyperspace. We need to be at least 50 light-years away when it goes. But as the human ships began disappearing into hyperspace, many Zephyrian refugees asked to stay and watch. They wanted to see their world's final moments. Jin agreed, positioning the Harmony at the edge of the safe zone. The bridge filled with both humans and Zephyrians, all staring at the screens in tense silence. Che found herself standing next to Dr. Hana, who had barely slept during the entire evacuation but insisted on being here for the end. "I've lived on that world for 60 years, Che whispered. "My children were born there. My parents are buried in the gardens outside Vorthak City." Hana placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry. I know this must be incredibly painful." On the main screen, their star began to pulse with increasingly violent energy bursts. The light shifted from yellow to white to blue as the stellar core reached critical temperature. Solar flares erupted like cosmic fireworks, each one larger than entire planets. "Stellar collapse has begun," announced the human science officer. "Supernova event in approximately 4 minutes." Those 4 minutes felt like forever. Zephyrian refugees held each other, some crying quietly, others sharing memories of home. Human crew members stood respectfully nearby, not intruding, but letting the aliens know they weren't alone in their grief. When it happened, it was both beautiful and terrible. The star suddenly expanded outward in a brilliant flash that briefly outshone every other light in the galaxy. The explosion was so intense that even from 50 light-years away, the Harmony's viewing screens automatically dimmed to protect everyone's eyes. Che watched 3 billion years of history disappear in that single moment of light. The homeworld where her ancestors had built their first cities, where they had learned to farm, where they had reached for the stars, all of it became nothing more than expanding gas and stellar debris. "It's gone," she said simply, tears streaming down her violet cheeks. Around the bridge, both humans and Zephyrians stood in silence as the shockwave spread outward from where their system used to be. The explosion was visible for thousands of light-years in every direction, but Che knew that most of the galaxy wouldn't even notice. Just another star going supernova in a universe full of such events. Admiral Jin stepped beside her, his own eyes reflecting the distant light of the explosion. "I know words can't help right now, but I want you to know that we understand what you're feeling." He gestured toward the observation deck, where hundreds of refugees were gathering to watch their world's final light fade. "Earth almost died too, about a century ago. We had wars that nearly destroyed everything, cities burned, billions died. We thought we were finished as a species." Che looked at him through her tears. "But you survived." "Barely," Jin admitted. "We learned that home isn't just a place. It's the people you care about, the culture you preserve, the values you choose to live by. Your world is gone, but your people survived. That means Zephyrian civilization survived too." The shockwave finally reached their position, rocking the massive ship gently as it passed. When it was over, the space where their system had existed was empty except for an expanding cloud of glowing gas. "What happens to us now?" asked Commander Shin, who had been quietly watching from the back of the bridge. Jin turned to face the assembled Zephyrians. "Now you build something new. We've prepared homes for your people throughout human space. You can stay together or spread out, whatever feels right. But you'll never be alone again." The response from the Galactic Council came within hours of news spreading about the Zephyrian rescue. Ambassador Che was still processing her people's survival when urgent messages began flooding human communication channels. "This is completely unacceptable," declared Chancellor Vex of the Alteran Republic. his blue face twisted with anger on the emergency broadcast. The humans have violated direct council orders and interfered with lawful quarantine procedures. D. Emergency session was hastily called on Nexus Prime, the galaxy's political center. Representatives from major species gathered in their grand chamber, but this time the mood was very different from when they had condemned the Zephyrians to death. Now they were furious that someone had dared to question their decision. Do these primitive humans think they have the authority to override council decisions? Demanded the Korthak War Minister, his armored claws clicking against his podium. They've been part of galactic society for barely 30 years. The Mortak delegate's tentacles writhed with indignation. The Zephyrians were lawfully sentenced to face the consequences of their species' actions. The humans have essentially aided criminals in escaping justice. But their real anger wasn't about justice or law, it was about embarrassment. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had been made to look heartless and cruel by a species they considered backwards barbarians. How could they maintain their authority when everyone could see that the primitives had more compassion than they did? We demand the immediate return of all Zephyrian refugees, declared the council chairman. They will be relocated to a suitable uninhabited world where they can live out their natural lives without causing further problems. Everyone knew what suitable uninhabited world meant. Some barren rock with minimal atmosphere where the Zephyrians would slowly die from disease and starvation. It would be technically not genocide, just abandonment with extra steps. The human response came 3 days later. Admiral Jin didn't travel to Nexus Prime or request permission to address the council. Instead, he simply broadcast his message across every communication channel in the galaxy, ensuring that every species, every world, every space station would hear it. Jin appeared on screens throughout known space, still wearing his simple blue uniform, still looking like an ordinary military officer. Behind him stood representatives from dozens of human worlds, but also something unprecedented: Zephyrian. Refugees who had chosen to stand with their rescuers. To the Galactic Council and all member species, Jin began, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. Humanity formally withdraws from all galactic treaties, trade agreements, and diplomatic arrangements effective immediately. The announcement sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The humans weren't just refusing to hand over the Zephyrians, they were completely breaking away from galactic civilization. Furthermore, Jin continued, we established the Terran Protection Accord. Any species abandoned by the Council, any refugees rejected by member worlds, any people facing extinction through galactic indifference will find sanctuary in human space. Ambassador Che, standing beside Jin, stepped forward. The humans saved us when no one else would. Now we stand with them. The reaction was explosive. Trade routes through human space carried nearly 30% of galactic commerce. Human colonies produced rare minerals that dozens of species depended on. Human medical research had revolutionized treatment for diseases that affected half the galaxy. This is economic terrorism, screamed the Vaxian Trade Minister. The humans are holding the galaxy hostage to protect criminals. Emergency meetings erupted across council space. Some species talked about military action to force the humans back into line. Others worried about the economic consequences of losing access to human technology and resources. But Jin wasn't finished. In a follow-up broadcast that reached even more systems than the first, he delivered the message that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. We've been called barbarians and primitives, he said, looking directly into the camera. Maybe that's true. Maybe civilized people would have calculated the political costs and let 2.3 billion innocents die. He paused, letting that sink in across thousands of worlds. But if civilization means abandoning helpless people to preserve your comfortable politics, then we choose to remain barbarians. True civilization isn't measured by how old your empire is, or how advanced your technology might be. It's measured by your willingness to help those in need, even when it costs you something. The broadcast ended with images of Zephyrian children, playing safely on human worlds, of families reunited in refugee centers, of a species given a second chance at life. The galaxy would never be the same. News of the human rescue spread like wildfire through the galaxy's underground networks. In refugee camps, aboard smuggler ships and in the forgotten corners of Council space, desperate people heard whispers of a species that actually kept their promises to help. The first to arrive were the Krillians. Their homeworld had been strip-mined by corporate interests until it became uninhabitable, leaving millions homeless and wandering from system to system. The Council had offered them temporary relocation assistance that had lasted 15 years with no permanent solution in sight. Captain Hanna was working in the medical bay aboard the Harmony when the first Krillian transport limped into human space. The ship was falling apart, held together with improvised repairs and desperate hope. 300 refugees were crammed into a vessel designed for 50. "They've been traveling for 8 months, reported Lieutenant Day, scanning the ship's condition. "Life support is failing and their medical supplies ran out weeks ago." Within hours, human rescue ships surrounded the dying transport. Medical teams boarded immediately, treating malnutrition, disease, and injuries that had gone untreated for months. The Krillians, who had grown used to being turned away at every port, couldn't believe they were actually being helped. "Why aren't you asking for our documentation?" asked Elder Min, the Krillian leader, as human medics treated her people. "Every other world demands proof of status, credits for processing, fees, guarantees we won't become a burden." Dr. Hanna looked up from treating a sick Krillian child. "Because you need help. That's the only documentation we require." Word continued to spread. The Valdani survivors arrived next, just 47 people, the last remnants of a species that had numbered in the billions before a plague swept through their worlds. The Council had quarantined their entire sector, leaving the survivors to die slowly on contaminated worlds. Then came the Threxian political refugees, intellectuals, and artists who had spoken out against their authoritarian government. Their own species had exiled them, and no Council world would risk diplomatic problems by offering asylum. Each group brought unique skills and knowledge. The Krillians were master miners and engineers who understood deep core extraction better than anyone in the galaxy. The Valdani, despite their small numbers, possessed advanced biotechnology that could revolutionize medicine. The Threxians brought art, literature, and philosophical insights that enriched human culture. Commander Tay was put in charge of establishing the first truly multi-species colony on a world they named New Haven. The project seemed impossible. So at first, how do you build a city for beings with completely different biological needs? The solution came from cooperation. Zephyrian engineers who had designed cities for their desert homeworld worked with human architects to create modular buildings that could be adapted for different species. Krillian miners excavated underground spaces for those who preferred enclosed environments. Threxian artists designed public spaces that felt welcoming to everyone. "This shouldn't work," Tay admitted to Admiral Jin during one of his progress reports. "We have species that breathe different atmospheres, eat different foods, have completely different social structures. By all logic, this should be chaos." "But it's not," Jin observed, watching the construction through the communication screen. In the background, human children played with young Zephyrians, while their parents worked together on building projects. Dr. Yoon's medical research became legendary throughout human space. By combining Zephyrian biotechnology with human resilience, studies and Valdani genetic techniques, she developed treatments that worked across species barriers. Diseases that had plagued certain aliens for centuries were suddenly curable. "The Council species hoard their knowledge," she explained to a gathering of multi-species medical teams. "They patent everything, restrict access, use medical advances as political weapons. We share everything freely." The economic benefits were immediate and dramatic. Krillian mining techniques increased human mineral extraction by 300%. Zephyrian desert agriculture helped human colonies thrive. On previously impossible worlds, Threxian mathematics advanced human computer technology by decades. But more importantly, something unprecedented was happening. Instead of the usual galactic pattern of stronger species dominating weaker ones, these refugee communities were building something based on mutual respect and shared benefit. The Council calls this the human experiment, Admiral Jin told the assembled leaders of New Haven during the colony's first anniversary celebration. "They're watching to see if we fail, if different species can really live together as equals." Elder Min of the Krillians stood up, her aged voice carrying across the crowd. "Then let's make sure we prove them wrong about what civilization actually looks like." The cheers that followed could be heard across 3 continents. 5 years had passed since the Zephyrian rescue, and the galaxy looked completely different. Ambassador Che walked through the council chambers of New Geneva, the capital of the Terran Protection Accord, marveling at how much had changed. The building itself represented everything the Accord stood for. Instead of the towering, intimidating architecture of the Galactic Council, this chamber was designed for equals. Representatives from dozens of species sat at the same level, in chairs sized appropriately for each being, with translation systems that ensured everyone could participate fully. "The Altaran Republic is requesting our assistance with the Corlex border dispute," reported Admiral Jin, now serving as the Accord's military coordinator. "Apparently, their traditional diplomatic methods aren't working." Che almost laughed at the irony. The same Altarans who had refused to help save her people were now secretly asking the barbarian humans to solve their problems. It wasn't just the Altarans. Over the past 2 years, 17 different council species had quietly reached out for help. The Korthak wanted human mediation in their trade war with the Vaxians. The Mortaks needed assistance, dealing with refugee crises they couldn't handle alone. Even the proud Nexari had asked for help when pirates started raiding their outer colonies. "Why do they come to us?" asked Commander Tay during a strategy meeting. 5 years ago, they wouldn't even acknowledge we were civilized. Dr. Hanna, now serving as the Accord's chief medical officer, smiled knowingly. "Because we actually solve problems instead of just talking about them." The numbers told the story. While the Galactic Council spent months debating responses to crises, the Terran Protection Accord acted within days. Their combined fleets, made up of ships from a dozen different species, patrolled trade routes that the Council could no longer protect effectively. The economic transformation had been even more dramatic. The Accord's open technology sharing had created innovations that left Council worlds scrambling to keep up. Zephyrian human hybrid engines were 30% more efficient than anything the galaxy had seen. Krillian mining techniques, combined with Valdani biotechnology, had revolutionized planetary development. "We're receiving another application for membership," announced Captain Hana's assistant, bringing a datapad to the meeting. "The Zelani Republic wants to join the Accord." The Zelani were a mid-level council species who controlled several important trade routes. Their application would bring the Accord's membership to 43 different species, more than a third of all known galactic civilizations. Later that evening, Che found herself in the gardens of New Haven, watching something that would have been impossible anywhere else in the galaxy. Human children played alongside young Zephyrians, their purple skin and silver hair mixing with the humans' diverse appearances. Krillian youngsters, with their rock-like features, built sandcastles, with Valdani children whose bioluminescent patches glowed softly in the twilight. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" said Admiral Jin, joining her on the observation deck. "Which part?" Che asked. "That my people survived, that the humans saved us, or that we've somehow built something better than what the Council ever achieved." Jin watched a group of mixed-species teenagers working together on some kind of science project. "Maybe all of it. When we first rescued your people, I thought we were just doing the right thing. I didn't imagine it would change the entire galaxy. But it had changed everything. The old system of powerful species dominating weaker ones was crumbling. Young people throughout Council space were asking why their governments couldn't solve problems the way the primitive humans did. Protest movements had sprung up on dozens of worlds, demanding their leaders show the same compassion and efficiency that had become synonymous with human leadership. "Do you ever regret it?" Che asked. "Your people could have stayed isolated, avoided all the political complications. You could have had a peaceful, quiet existence." Jin was silent for a long moment, watching the children play. "My grandfather used to tell me that the measure of a person isn't what they do when it's easy. It's what they do when doing the right thing costs them something." A young Zephyrian girl ran up to them, her violet skin flushed with excitement. "Ambassador Che, look what we built." She held up a small device that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light. "It's a universal translator," explained her human friend, a boy about the same age. "It can work with any language, even ones we've never heard before." The two children had unconsciously demonstrated everything the Accord represented. Different species working together, sharing knowledge freely, creating something neither could have built alone. "The Council still calls us barbarians," Jin said quietly, as the children ran off to show their invention to other friends. Che smiled, watching the future of galactic civilization play together in the fading light. "Then maybe the galaxy needs more barbarians,"